A quick video demonstration of how to configure your megapixel cameras and connect it to your NVR. First, we're going to use our Discover tool that will allow us to find out what's the IP address of the megapixel camera. Normally, some of our megapixel cameras, like the 2 megapixel dome camera, the 3 megapixel dome IR camera, and the 3 megapixel box camera, are configured with DHCP. So it's gonna, as soon as you plug that camera on your network, it's gonna get an IP from your router. In my case, I have an NVR and a 2 megapixel dome camera, and the 2 megapixel dome camera is configured as DHCP. The NVR has the default IP, which is 192.168.1.108. So the first thing I need to know is what is the network that I'm in. Basically, I have to go to Start, Command Prompt, and then type a command called ipconfig. Once it shows the IP of my computer, I can tell that I'm within the same network as the default IP of the DVR or the NVR. The network is very important to know what your network schema is, because if you are in a different network, you're going to have to configure your NVR or devices on your network to be compatible or to be within the network. So because I know that my NVR is 192.168.1.108, this portion of the IP, it's what is going to tell me that I'm within the network. Even though the IP on this computer is different than the DVR, it's supposed to be like that, but I'm still within the network. If my network was 192.168.0.1 or .0.250 or something, I have to configure the NVR to an IP similar to that, but the last number will be different. So the next step is to ping the NVR. In this case, I will execute ping space 192.168.1.108, and I got response, so I know the NVR is reachable. At this point, I don't know what the IP of the camera is, and for that I will use the Discover tool or the config tool. I already downloaded from my website. The link is going to show below in this video. So I just click on the Discover tool, and it's going to show me everything that is running on my network. There is a series of filters here. You can choose IPv4, which is the standard right now, and hit refresh. And these two numbers right here, there are 2 DVRs that I have on the network. I'm not interested on those. So I know the NVR is .1.108, this one over here, and this is my megapixel camera. So the first thing I need to know is I can go ahead and access the megapixel camera from here, like the configurations, by just right-clicking and click Open Device Web, and it brings the web service. Now, what I recommend you is to change the IP of the camera to a static IP of something that you're not using on your network. You don't need to find out of an IP that you're not using on your network. You just have to go to the command prompt again and try to ping a random IP within the same network. So I know that 1.108 it's taken on the network, and then based on this result right here, the 1.36 is taken, and then that 1.5 is taken. So let's try to ping, let's say, 192.168.1.109. Alright. If you're not getting a response, that means that this IP address is not taken by any of the hosts or any of the devices plugged into my router. So that is a good IP to use. So I can click this and double click on the IP of the megapixel. We said that it was .1.181, so just double click on it. It's going to ask you for the admin account and the password and the port. By default is admin, and the port that this software uses is the 37777, the TCP port. So log in. And you can see right now it's set to DHCP. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to uncheck DHCP, and I'm going to change the IP address to that 1.109, because that's what is I didn't find any host on my network with that IP. So once I change that, I click Save, and I wait a little bit, and it should pop up a little window that says Save Successful. And once it's done, the megapixel camera is already configured with this IP, and it's static. It will never change again. So I click Save, or OK, and you can see he already searched for that IP. So now I know my NVR is that 1.108, and my IP camera is that 1.109. So the first thing we need to do is we need to configure the megapixel cameras. Everything should be configured individually on the megapixel camera first. You should connect one item at the time. If you connect all of the cameras, it's not recommended because it's not easy to manage. So once you have one camera plugged in and you change the IPs, just go ahead and connect the other one, and so on and so forth. So right click on that IP address, open device web, and here's the interface of the megapixel camera. Just use the username and password, which is admin. Eventually you will see that you will have to install some ActiveX controls or something like that. I already configured that on my computer, so there's videos that explain how to do that as well. Okay, this is the live picture of it, or what the camera is viewing right now. I can just double click on it, and this is the full screen. So the next step will be to go to the setup and start configuring the camera. The first interface you're going to see is going to be this. And here you can change, the brightness of the picture. This is going to, it's going to be changing the colors of the camera, and that's how the camera is going to be recording to the NVR. So be careful with that. It's just not for viewing. It's actually how the camera will be recording. Okay, you can change the contrast, the hue, saturation, the exposure mode. You can change it to low noise if you want to. I mean, there is plenty of configurations here that you can play with it based on your environment. For this demonstration, I'm going to leave everything default. You see, once I default everything, the camera will flip the image because the camera is sitting on a table. It's sitting on a surface right now. So for this demonstration, I'm going to have to change it back. I'm going to choose flip 180 degrees, and then I'm going to click mirror on, and this is actually how the picture is. Okay, so the next step will be the video. This part is very important. The way that it works is our NVRs are capable of recording at 1080p maximum. This is the maximum resolution of that the NVR can handle. So if you have to be very careful how you're going to configure your megapixel cameras, because based upon the amount of megapixel cameras you're plugging into your network with the through the NVR, you're going to be able to stream X amount of cameras through the NVR. In other words, if you're planning to put more than 4 cameras at 1080p, there is a restriction that you have to change your cameras, or there's a modification you have to do in your cameras in order for the NVR to recognize more than 4 cameras at 1080p at 30 frames per second. The way it works is like this. Our NVRs are capable of doing 4 cameras at 1080p at 30 frames per second, 8 at 720p at 30 frames per second, and then D1 or 16 of those cameras at D1 at 30 frames per second. So again, 4 at 1080p at 30 frames per second, 8 at 720p at 30 frames per second, and then 16 at D1 at 30 frames per second. If you notice, I'm talking about real time, 30 frames per second. Now, if you're planning to use more than 4 cameras, or if you're planning to connect more than 4 cameras to your NVR, at 1080p, you will need to reduce the frames. Why? Because at 1080p, the NVR supports up to 120 frames. At 720p, the NVR supports up to 240 frames. And at D1, the NVR supports up to 480 frames. So it's a calculation that you have to do. Let's look for the calculator here, and I will explain you how it works. So if I'm configuring my cameras at 1080p, and I wanted to put, let's say, 6 cameras on my network at 1080p, what I will do is I divide 120 frames, which is the maximum amount of frames at 1080p that NVR supports, divided by the amount of cameras. So we said that it was going to be 6 equals 20. So this 20 represents the frames per second you need to configure the cameras at 1080p. So let's say that I'm not interested on 720p, on 1080p. I'm interested on 720p. So what I will do is remember I said 240 frames per second will be when you're configuring the cameras at 720p. That's what the NVR can handle. So I will divide 240 frames, divided, let's say 6 cameras. Now this is unrealistic. I mean, I cannot configure the cameras at 40 frames per second. So in that case, what I will do is I will do 240 divided by, let's say, 10 cameras. Each camera has to be configured at 720p at 24 frames per second. Okay, this is for 720p and 1080p and D1. D1 we said that it was 480 frames divided by 16, because that's the amount of cameras. That's why I can put 16 cameras at D1. I'm talking about megapixels at 30 frames per second. If you wanted to put 4 megapixels at 1080p, of course you can do 120 divided by 4. You can configure each camera at 30 frames per second. But if you wanted to put more than 4 cameras, you have to reduce the frames on those cameras. Okay? Remember, the frames will not decrease the resolution or the quality of the picture. It's just will make the picture not to be real time. It will not run smoothly. What I'm saying is that the picture will not look smoothly, but it will still have a 1080p high quality picture. Okay? So here on the encode, what I'm concerned right now is how the NVR or how the camera is going to be configured. My recommendation is, and is depending upon how many cameras you're going to put on your network, you configure this at 1080p, the frames per second based on the amount of cameras you're plugging into this NVR, and the bit rate, configure it as low as you can. At 30 frames per second, the lowest is 4096, which is 4 megabits per second. That's pretty fast. So it's fair enough you're going to have a clear picture. So now if I reduce this frames, let's say to 10 frames per second, now my lowest will be 1536, which is 1.5 megabits per second. Okay, so for this demonstration, I'm going to leave it at 30 frames per second. This is just covering how to connect the camera, or how to configure the camera to connect to your NVR. So I'm going to do 4096 for the mainstream, and then I'm going to go to the extra stream or the substream, and I'm going to configure it to D1. At 30 frames per second, it's fine. I'm going to load here 768, and I'm going to save it. Okay. The next part will be under here on the code stream type. I'm going to change that to motion, and you see automatically it puts the high bit rate. I'm going to lower it down to 4096 as well. Click Save. You're done. This is the only part on the resolution part that you have to configure. Overlay, it's up to you if you want to leave the channel title. You can change it if you want to. You can put here whatever it's intuitive to you. I can put 2MP cam, and the time title I can leave it like that. I can click Save, and this will change once I log into the NVR when I put it in. The path is where, if you take a snapshot of the picture, it will go to this path on C drive, and there is going to create a little folder right there. It says picture download. Next option will be the network. You can leave this exactly the same because we already changed the IP address. The connection. This is basically the ports that if you wanted to put this camera by itself on your network, you can change the ports here, and then you have to port forward that. Now, if you have multiple cameras and you wanted to port forward, or you wanted to access each camera individually, these ports have to change. Okay, if you notice right now, if I try to put 81, it's going to tell me that that's not available. So I have to use a different port. I have to go higher than what they're saying right there. You see? So I can do, let's say, 88, 88, and that will be okay. And for the other ports, you know, this is the range that you can go. So this is if you wanted to configure the cameras again, if you wanted to access it individually, if you have multiple cameras. I'm going to leave this as it was. So save that. And click Save. Okay. The next step will be Event. Video Detect. This is very important because if you don't enable this, you will be able to see the camera on the NVR, but you will not. The NVR will not be able to record that camera. So you have to enable this. Anti-dither is a delay. The object has to be at least 5 seconds in front of the camera for it to recognize as a motion event. The sensitivity, you can configure it here as well. I recommend you to put it on 4. It's not. It's good so far. What I have tested. The anti-dither, you can leave it exactly the same as it is. The record, make sure that is enabled, and the record delay is basically the post-record. Video masking, you don't have to enable this. This is if you wanted to mask some areas of the video. I forgot to save that. Click Save. Make sure you always click Save on the options that it allows you to save it. Abnormality, that's okay. You don't have to change anything for it to connect to the NVR. The schedule. This is primarily for cameras that it has SD cards. I recommend you to change it to motion so you don't have to configure that later on. So make sure that you uncheck alarm, check all for all dates, and then click Save, and then save again. Destination, this is where it's going to be storing the information if you're recording directly at the camera for cameras that support SD cards. You can see here, you can change the path. You can use the local will be an SD card, and FTP will be an FTP server outside. You cannot use both, or local and FTP. You cannot do that. Okay. Here is where you configure your local. I mean, if you have an SD card, it will show up there. And this is the FTP configurations of the server if you wanted to back it up to an FTP server. Record control. This is the pack duration. This is when it's dumping files to an SD card. It's going to cut the files by 8 minutes each. And the pre-record is 5 seconds. If the motion happens, let's say if a motion happens for 10 seconds, it will go back 5 seconds. And it will go forward 10 seconds. That's for the post-record. This is the pre-record. Okay. Overwrite. If you wanted to overwrite the oldest files in an SD card. And the record type. Now you can choose if you wanted the lower resolution or if you want the mainstream. I recommend you to leave it on the mainstream though. Okay. The next step will be system. And then under general, here is how the camera is going to be discovered on the NVR when you do an IP search on the NVR. Now, for me, it's easier to name each camera depending upon what camera it is. So for this demonstration, I'm going to do, this is a 2 megapixel dome, and that will be okay for me. I hit save. Now go to the day and time. Here is up to you. I mean, I like it to have it on month, date, and year, 12 hours, and this is the time zone is very important. My time zone right now is -4, and I click sync PC, so it will sync the time. Actually, this is not right. It's actually 9 o'clock. It's actually 8 o'clock. All right, 8. Maybe my time zone here. No, that's fine. All right. So I'm going to click again. There you go. Click Save. And from here, you're pretty much done. Now, when you have multiple cameras that you need to configure, what I recommend you to do is you can save the you can configure a camera if it's the same model and the same type of firmware. What I will do is I configure one camera, and then I will import, or I will export those configurations to my desktop, then import those to the new camera when I plug it in. It makes it easier. You don't have to do this, all the time when you're trying to configure the camera. You don't have to go over every single step, because when you import and export the configurations, it's pretty much very little changes that you have to make. So what I will do is I will go import, I will go export, or actually import, export, and then export those configurations. You can name it however you want it. You can put 2MP DOM settings, and it will be, that's it. Once this says okay, I can go ahead and now import it for the new camera, of course. And there you go. I can just click on it, and then we'll say that it was okay. Now, this will not change the IP address, and it will not change the day and time. Right now, because I already configured this, it's going to be like that. But when you import it to a new camera, the default will not be like this. So when you import these configurations, what is going to import, or what is going to the configurations that is going to import is going to be it's going to be condition, it's going to be the video resolution that you have it set, but nothing related to the network, because it will not make sense to import the same IP, otherwise it will get a conflict. So you see, it will import it, overlay and all that. You see, this is the name of the camera that I just created before. Under the event, I change certain stuff here and so on. Like I can actually see if it works by changing. Let's say I change the sensitivity here, and then I click Save, and then I will import it, and it will come back as it was before. So we're all set for the camera. Right now, the next step is put it on the NVR, or start recording on the NVR, or connect it to the NVR. So let me log out, and the NVR IP is that 1.108. This NVR is running over port 80, so I don't have to put :88 or something like that. Only if I change it. This is the default, that 1.108. So I put the password of the NVR. There you go. The NVR interface looks exactly the same as our DVR. So, and actually I don't have any disk on the NVR, so that's why that pops up right there. Go to config. By the way, if I try to open a channel right now, it's going to say that there's nothing there, and nothing's going to pop up. Okay? So I go to config, go to remote device, and basically the DVR or the NVR is going to search everything on the network. Everything that has to be compatible with our type of DVRs and so on, it will find it on the network. But you see, it found the IP of my 2 megapixel DOM, and this is why I changed that name. You see how intuitive it is? It's easier for me to know. Let's say you don't remember the IP, but there you go. You change the name, and this is how it finds it. So I just double click on it, and you will see that it populates the information here. Let me try to do that again. Let me go back. Let me go here. You see, right now this is the default. When I double click on the megapixel camera I want, double click, you see it pops up all the information. Now if you change the password of your camera for the admin account, you will have to put it in here. Okay, if you change it to something else rather than the default. Okay, so the next step will be, you see this is the megapixel I choose, and click enable, and then hit save. And I'm all set. I can see right now if I go to camera number 1, there's a camera. Now, we're good in there. Just make sure that your NVR is recording those channels. You have to also, if you go to encode, you'll see that it will bring the information from the channel, from the camera that I have configured before. Remember, I configured the camera to be 1080p at 30 frames per second and so on. I can actually change this to, let's say, 10 frames per second, and that will send the information to the camera as well. So if you log into the camera by itself, you will see that information as well, that I already changed it from the NVR. Okay, I'm not going to change anything. I'm okay there. So here, I'm going to change this to motion detection in all of the channels. Save. Good there. This is the network portion of the NVR. On detect, very important to know if everything is working correctly here. Make sure that each channel is recorded on its own channel. And as you see, this information was brought from the camera itself. Remember, I configured the sensitivity as 4. I enabled that record channel under event, remember? So, and here and this has to be on. And then this is the channel that I'm at, or that I connect that camera to. So that's pretty much it in terms of configuring the NVR and all that. The rest is, make sure that your NVR is, set to schedule for recording, and that's pretty much it. And this is the picture, and from here I can, remote view, or remote view actually the NVR and look at the camera itself from the NVR itself. Okay, so I hope this has been informative to you, and thank you for watching.